Right, we'll get on with this afternoon's programme then. Now, 40 years ago this month, at a variable star meeting at south of Birmingham, I met a young lad as keen as mustard on variable stars. And this afternoon, we've been friends ever since. And now he's going to give us a talk. Where is he, Rob?
Is he?
There he is, there. Well, in only 40 years, we can't recognise him 7 feet away.
I had hair in there.
So Tom, he's now going to tell us for the next 15 minutes about a really interesting object that came to light on Ian's death, Ian Miller's death. There's only one person who happened to get hold of this object through the president of the BA, David Januszewski. And I thought to myself, what can I do with this? And Rob instantly came to mind, thinking, well, he might know what it is, and he might be able to get it to work. I don't know if he's completely but I'm going to pass you over to Rob now for the next 15 minutes to talk about this fascinating object. Rob Januszewski.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me at the back there? This is for the recording.
Oh, for the recording.
Yes.
Oh, where am I going to stick this?
So we'll see if it.
Thanks, gentlemen. Right, to reiterate what Jeremy said at the start of the day, it's lovely to be back here in the Humphrey Rooms. I've been coming here for at least 30 years plus to many meetings, including the variable star meetings, deep sky meetings, and the last time I was here, we had it was a comet section meeting, and we had Roy Panther here, so it was really, really nice occasion. Right, yes, an unidentified astronomical instrument. Now, on the forum, the BAA's forum, a year and a half ago, or maybe nearly 2 years ago, a post appeared regarding the instrument. And this was it from the president, David RDT. Not sure, we can't read this. What he did say, he wasn't sure what the instrument was. Could somebody identify it? And knowing that Ian was a variable star observer, it was likely to be some form of photometer. I think I made a suggestion, which was obviously completely wrong. Well done, Rob. And then later someone correctly identified it as a photoelectric photometer. So thinking, how do I make this last 15 minutes? I did think about photometry and drawing on the knowledge that I had reading about this in the late 70s and early 80s, I thought I'd just have a look at the history of photometry. Now, it's interesting that this guy, William Monk, in 1892, produced a photometer using selenium and was able to detect a photovoltaic current from that. So this is the man here, a typical Grand Victorian amateur astronomer based in Dublin. Now, the true photoelectric era begins around 1912 with a German, Paul Gutnick, at the Berlin Observatory. Using this 12-inch telescope, he was able to demonstrate the ratio of the cell's responses for Lyrae, alpha Lyrae to alpha Cygni. It was in accord with the ratio from visual photometry. So what he was able to show was that, that this device could accurately record light changes in stars and obviously other astronomical objects. And this is the man here. That's more like the dress for the Edwardian period. So the first photomultiplier single stage was early 1930s, earlier than I thought actually, and electrostatic photomultipliers 1937 to present. Now that means that by 1937, the basis of a typical photoelectric photometer was already in place and essentially has remained the same ever since, with obviously improvements with some amounts of technology involved. So the principle of a photoelectric multiplier tube, a PMT, is this device here. So we have a photocathode that receives the photons. The photons then produce electrons, which are magnified by these diodes as it travels down the tube to be received down here on the anode and give an output signal. Obviously, that's an electrical signal that would have to be converted into a numeric value to give a magnitude. And obviously, and that would involve calibration too. And here's one here. That's quite a beast, isn't it? Have you seen the size of that? Who remembers valves in the TV? This is a similar kind of thing, isn't it? I'm not sure you'd want to bang this like the TV though, just in case it wasn't outputting correctly. So they're pretty big devices, and you can see along here. These are the cells that the diodes that will increase and multiply that current, those electrons, which hitting the surface here. Now, it is here in the box, and you can come and have a look at it later if you like, is this object, which was Ian Miller's. Now, Gary tells me that Ian he wasn't aware, and other members of the VSS were not aware that Ian had built this. And it clearly is a home-built instrument. I'll say more about that in a moment. Give you some idea of the scale. That's 7 inches or about 180 millimeters. You can clearly see here the eyepiece for viewing and the attachment to the telescope. There are some controls which I'll come to around here, and this controls a flip mirror so that the signal would go from the, obviously a mirror here at 45 to the eyepiece back here on another mirror, or from the readings, which would be through the photomultiplier, the PMT. On the back here, I'm not familiar with what all these might be. Clearly, this is the flip mirror. One of these is going to be for a variable aperture, I would imagine. Now, understanding photoelectric photometry, and what I recall from it is that you locate the star and you need to have an aperture that encloses the star. Very similar to modern CCD photometry, where you've got that little annulus, which you can change the shape of or the size of to accommodate the full width half maximum value of that star being read. So here's a view from the other end. Now this one here is going to be clearly probably the power supply. And there was another lead here which goes to a readout counter, which I'll show in the next photo, and possibly another one here, not sure what that was. Are there any PEP people in the audience who've... You did, and did you get it working? Wow. So you might know what some of these things are then. Right. I love Roger's sarcasm. Right. This one, yeah, I guess that would be the voltage input. I'll come to that in a moment. So this is the equipment that was in the case. So we've got obviously the counter for the readout. This is obviously the high voltage, the input. Not sure what this one does or where it goes to. So David Arditi mentions in that post that he did power it up and it seemed to be working. But obviously the box you
didn't give it to me.
Didn't. So we have a mystery. We need to find this power supply so we can get this working. Would there be any benefit of using it? I don't know. Now, looking at the section's database, there aren't any PEP observations in there. Now, I don't know if historically people have contributed PEP observations, but they're certainly not in the current database. And you might explain why. It's supposed to be you asking the questions, not me. But obviously this instrument and the use of it and whatever is a bit of a mystery. So PEP observation didn't see anybody. AAVSO still has contributors. They even have a guide to doing PEP and that. So that would be interesting. Now, photoelectronic photometry legacy. revolutionised photometry. Prior to that, any kind of measurements of the brightness of stars would rely on the Mark I eyeball. And obviously, we all know the pros and the cons of visual observing and responses to red stars and blue stars, etc. Now, certainly thinking about when I was reading about photometry in the pages of the likes of Sky and Telescope in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a company called Optic who actually still exist and make commercial photoelectric photometers, but the cost around then was certainly in the order of thousands of pounds. So back in 1980, that was a huge sum of money. The alternative, as it always has been for amateurs, is to build your own. But I believe the cost of the photomultiplier tube was also pretty expensive as well. And you would need the mechanical and the electrical know-how to put one together. Process of obtaining data, not as straightforward as modern CCD photometry. This involves finding your star, measuring it, and finding a blank bit of sky next to it and measuring that so that you could then obtain a magnitude. So, and obviously the introduction of CCDs, which are now incredibly cheap, has meant that any future for photoelectric photometry, I would imagine, is fairly limited. And that's me done.
Okay. Will you open the case and leave it there? So
Yes, I can open the case. I'll take it out and just demonstrate it before the next speaker comes on. So you get an idea of the size of the instrument. Now you can see, interestingly, you need a pretty hefty scope and mount to take that. That is a, yeah, it's heavier than the modern CCD camera, isn't it? Yeah, and obviously because on a CCD frame you've got lots of stars of reference. In here you're only looking at one, trying to image one tiny star on it in isolation. So I mean, you would know, obviously, yes. What, a photo multiplier? Well, I would hope so. Oh no, it's a homemade one. Ian Miller. Oh, the tube? No, I haven't. You would have to dismantle it, I guess. And I was a bit cautious of photoelectric static. Yeah. In here. So this is where you fit it to telescope here, and this is a viewing eyepiece with a little flip mirror here, so you can flip it between the PMT and the visual aspect. Oh right, okay. It's his ability to be able to put this together. Yeah, yeah, it's very nicely put together. Slightly Heath Robinson in terms of its box-like construction, but really nicely finished off. It's really well done. Yeah.
I will say that Rob, for the last 12 months, has been desperate to try and get this thing working again. But he's always been worried about blowing the grid out in Drumsgrove.
I think why the Worcestershire would be more. Indeed.
Given the
Yes, if you don't mind, yeah.
We do have PEP data, which I think is that in the Dropbox account. But one thing we should check, basically, we should get all the data together. But one issue we have is the PEP data isn't in a format, it can easily be put into the database. So if we had volunteers to do that, we could. Otherwise, it waits on me to have time to try and come up with a way of converting it into a nice uniform format, which can then just be loaded in.
Is there a lot of that data, Andy? PEP data?
Roger's probably in a better position than me. I've seen one or two files.
There wasn't too many. I know there was. Is it Jack Owls who was also? Jack Owls was a PEP observer.